Hey, everybody. Hey, so who went remote? Is that yeah, raise your hands if you've worked remote at any point in the last 2 years. We have also been working remote. So I'm Bill. I'm from Granicus.
I'm Nawid. I am also from Granicus.
I'm Kristi. Pronouns are she, her. Also software engineer at Granicus.
Yeah, and we went remote, and we figured a lot of people have gone remote, so let's just talk about that. I think we all have learned things. We probably all have feelings. There's probably things we've liked about it. There's probably things we've all been frustrated by about it. So we're just going to have this fairly informal conversation. We'll share what our experience has been at Granicus, but also we'll throw questions out to the audience, to all of you, because I'm sure all of you have lessons and things that you want to share. So yeah, let's talk about it. Before we get into that, I do quickly want to say, what is Granicus? Because you're probably wondering, what the hell is Granicus? It's probably the biggest company you haven't heard of. Basically, if you've had an interaction online with a government, it's probably been through something that Granicus provides. We provide things like digital communications, especially email. We do a lot of email sending, websites, city council management, video. So for example, St. Paul City Council, we manage their online city council space. If you've ever gotten an email through something called GovDelivery, that's us. So yeah, pretty much any email you've gotten from a government probably came through us. And I'm trying to think. I'm sure there's other things that we're missing. But connecting governments with constituents is basically what Granicus does. We can talk about this a bit when we get into this, but Granicus is a global company. So this is actually a map of colleagues that I've talked with in the last month or so at Granicus. And I think this will be interesting to talk about because this map got bigger over the course of remote work. And we're hiring. Thank you. This has been a great conversation. Seriously, if you or anybody you know is looking to do design, development, product work, basically anything, and have it be in the space of connecting constituents with their government, with government services, we're hiring, and we are a totally remote company. So pretty much no matter where you are or where your friends are, we'll probably want to talk to you. Question?
Do you guys do asynchronous work because you're all in different time zones, I'm assuming?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have pockets of where a lot of people are. We definitely have a lot of people based in the US and in India and in Australia, UK, and so people tend to kind of work more with people near them, but we do also have staggered work times. So in the morning, the US people can talk with folks in India. But yeah, that's actually a great thing about remote work that we can talk about. So with that, how we're going to do this is basically I'm just going to pose questions, and I'll ask Nawid and Kristi what their thoughts are, what their experiences are, and then throw it out to you guys. So let's start with probably the biggest one. How do work relationships get established, get formed while we're all remote? So, Kristi, would you like to talk at all about your experience of trying to maintain relationships with the people you work with?
Sure. I don't think oh, it is on. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to spend at least a few months in the office before we went remote, so I got to know a lot of my coworkers before we were, little flat images on everybody's screens, which was a benefit.
Pixelated images.
Yeah, little guys. Yeah, so I think we as a team have kind of made an effort to have some sort of unstructured time together. So we do some lunches that don't really have a purpose other than kind of connecting with each other. And then I think we've had to kind of make an effort to get to know each other and not just be strictly work focused in all of our meetings or interactions. Because if you were in an office, right, you'd walk by someone's desk and have the opportunity to talk about something other than whatever you're working on. So I think just being more intentional about that is what we've had to do.
Yeah. Nawid would.
I'm just gonna do the thing.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nawid again. So I started after the company went remote. Onboarding was its own process, and getting to know everybody who were all at that point largely based out of the St. Paul office. But as my tenure at the company kind of progressed, we did like expand to all over the U.S., places where there were no main offices, and so for me it was all the same the entire time. But getting to know the existing teammates who had already all known each other in person, me not knowing what the back of their heads looked like was a strange thing. And it definitely, me as a person who definitely requires or not requires, I guess, because I've been doing it for a year and a half now without it, but the physicality, the sitting next to a person, and getting to know their full body language, that was very important to me. But you do with what you got, and at the time, I had just spent some time with everybody individually, getting to know them on a one-on-one basis, because just having like a very non-work oriented conversation can get you a long way, and getting to know your coworkers on a human level is very important to me and to the company. And I think a big push in the beginning was very impactful for my general experience of the company and with my team.
Yeah. So I have two mics. I don't know which one I should talk into. Yeah, okay, I'll just do like this. So yeah. Oh, hey, there's a question.
So since my laptop got turned off at 3:38 yesterday, so it's my last day at Granicus on a project, my question is this, though. How intentional do we need to be going forward as we're onboarding people? Like, how much do you think, it's a we, but now it's a you, right? But like, how we have 15 people starting on Monday? Like, how intentional do you get with people as they're onboarding and assimilating into teams, and what did you do 2 years ago versus what are we doing now? How does it evolve?
It's like Paul knew what the next thing was going to be.
That's hilarious. I did not know.
That's an excellent question. Do either you have any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've done better jobs in different situations. I remember when Nawid started, we were pretty intentional about scheduling a set time during your first few weeks to meet one-on-one and get to know each other a little bit on a personal basis. And we haven't done that with everyone that's started, but I do think that that's a good strategy, especially as people are waiting for access to things. It's like a nice way to have people not sitting around and wondering what to do when they get started.
Yeah. I think there's like the non-one-on-one element as well. When you don't know somebody and they're joining your team and they're an integral part, especially if anyone knows what it's like to join a new company. I don't know anybody here. Remote makes that just a little bit harder. So not only having those one-on-one conversations about nothing, but like just getting to know the other person, you also want to make sure that you're including them in meetings and just, hey, new person, do you have any thoughts about X, Y, or Z, when it's a discussion or a meeting that they might feel comfortable having input into, if it's like a general conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I'll get you in a minute. Yeah, as we talk about this, I think about things like, so Kristi, you mentioned like waiting for access. And I know that's one thing, to be honest, Granicus struggled a little bit with. Granicus was initially a primarily in-office work culture with kind of like work from home friendliness. And then, overnight went totally remote, as I'm sure many of the places that we all work did. And one thing we definitely saw, the IT department struggled a little bit, which as you imagine, that's like a pretty hard switch to go from supporting people primarily in offices where you can walk over and help somebody with their laptop to now it's entirely remote. So yeah, I'd say like, Paul, to your question, I think that's one thing companies really need to think about is like, if we're now working primarily remotely, is like really think about how do we even get the basics, like how do we get computers to people? How do we get like accounts set up and do it remotely? Do it in a way where there may not even be like direct communication with the person who's being hired. Another thing I think about is like, what you said about like spending time with people on your team. And like, there can be like a company policy of this, but it really comes down to the individual teams. Like, I don't know about like where you all work, but we're primarily working in teams that are like 5, 10 people, in a company of around 1,000. So like, there's a lot of decentralized relationship building. There's a lot of decentralized team norming, team formation. And so I guess maybe to your question, Paul, like I think another thing would just be like training the team lead or the people on teams to actually like to talk about what does it mean to intentionally try and build relationships with people, providing that space for like informal discussion, doing like remote lunches, which by the way, hey, get your company to pay for remote lunches. That was one thing we made sure to do. Like we used to have in-person lunches and then we all went remote and I'm like, well, I'm still, it's like $25 or $30 to get DoorDash to deliver something. I ain't paying for that. Games, actually, like there's just kind of like, fun games like, what Jackbox games, I think. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we're going all out of order now. Here, actually, yeah, let's go in order.
You actually answered part of it just on the size of the team. So can you help me understand what the size of the team was at the start of the pandemic and how that changed? And the dots were super helpful. How much of that was people that were new hires versus people that you had moved during the pandemic to remote?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say the whole company. So one piece of information is Granicus itself has been growing pretty quickly over the last 5 years or so, primarily through acquiring companies. So I'd say the whole company probably doubled over the course of the pandemic, and grew not just in number of people working for it, but in geographic scope. So like if we go back to that map, I'd say it used to really just be the US and UK. And then over the course of the pandemic, the company started an office in Bangalore, acquired a company or two in Australia. But then also, once you go remote, there's not really any physical, limitations to where you hire somebody. So I think we also just naturally started working with people from just a wider area. Does that answer your question? And yeah, what?
All right. Okay.
Oh, all right.
I'll take one first. My name's Lauren. I work for Gainsight. We're a customer success platform that improves your net revenue retention. And we've been remote for 11 years. So way before this, we had people all over the place. And two practices that I love about how we onboard people are, number one, we have people start from the time they accept their offer letter, getting into weekly team statuses. That might be difficult in a regulated or government organization, but like we start copying them and we make them status update to us, which is like, I'm on vacation with my family this week. Like, we're doing nothing this week. But it gives you something small to talk with them about when they do start. And they're also up to speed. So we start them getting weekly status reports by email or Slack outputs, T-minus 4 weeks. And the second thing is, we drip them their laptop and their swag as slowly as possible. Like, you could make this much more efficient, but we ship you one box with your laptop. We ship you another box with a t-shirt. We ship you a third box with like a chocolate cake. We ship you a fourth box with a Grubhub gift card to take your wife out to dinner. Like, we do it every day. You get something in the mail for like 2 weeks, and it really gives people like a cultural boost when they start.
It's nice.
Two of my favorite parts.
I want a cake.
It also like explodes out little butterflies. It's got rubber bands, and then they fly around your room. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
Harry Potter.
My question really has to do with how you organize what you're doing in terms of new people. And I've been involved in a couple of startups, but I was at Intel in a software group before that. And there would be big projects that were on schedule. They were on an MBO thing. Everybody knew what they were doing, et cetera, in the reports. And new people would form into an organization. However, the skunk works is what always won. It would always be the stuff that wasn't on the chart that would actually win. So how do new hires get integrated into the skunk works?
Ooh. And actually, could you, just for people who don't know what Skunkworks is,
Yeah.
could you?
Oh, well, it's any kind of unofficial, not actually planned project. So anyway.
Gotcha. So I think to the Skunkworks question, I'd say in general, there's a lot of things get planned. So just in general, I don't know, we definitely do things where we're like, oh yeah, we should try this technology or try and come up with this solution. But often those are kind of smaller projects, and if they succeed, then they become like a more planned out project for the year. To the question about organizing new people coming in, Kristi, I know you were here during the shift from in-person to remote, and a lot of people have joined your team.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. I think for us, documenting things became much more important when we went remote, because we couldn't just walk to IT and be like, oh, by the way, also we need this other thing. So through several iterations of new people joining our team, this sort of onboarding checklist got bigger and bigger, and with different sections, with who needs what from which department. So I guess documenting as we went was really important for us.
In addition to that, you use video.
Yes. That is another thing I was definitely wanting to talk about. Again, it's like you all know what's coming up. It's like you all have been living this the last 2 years. Another question.
Well, this is more of a statement kind of conveying my experience. I joined a small company. 3 days later, it was acquired. I was going into a new industry, small company, global, learning 2 companies all at once. The challenge that I faced was having somebody kind of come in and mentor me along the way to go, here's what I can share about the industry, here's what I can share about our organization, as well as what you might want to learn about the acquiring company. So having a designated mentor come alongside would have been extraordinarily helpful. And I know that that's harder when it's remote. I joined when it was remote, and I did get to know some people, but it would have been nicer to be able to go, what is it that you guys do again? I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. You have a question?
Yeah. So do you guys measure the effectiveness of having remote workers? And specifically, what are you measuring? Is it strictly productivity? Is it employee satisfaction? Is it retention? Are you doing any things as far as measuring the ability, and maybe it's being able to fill roles because it's maybe easier to fill roles because you have the remote opportunities. But that may mean you also have higher churn. Is there anything that you guys are measuring, and how do you measure it?
Do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah, I think from a recruiting perspective, I'll just talk really loud. I think from a recruiting perspective, like, and again, I just finished 9 months, so it's fresh. I think that, right, when you can recruit across the U.S. and you can recruit in the U.K. and you can recruit developers in Melbourne, and we've opened up the office in Bangalore. Recruiting's been easier. Here's the caveat, though, and it's been easier for everybody else too, right? So there's and I'll talk about later today in a presentation I'm doing about hiring, but hiring didn't necessarily become a lot easier when we went remote because everybody else did too. So competition in Kansas City, in Boise, in Minneapolis is also compounded by the fact that so is Facebook, Meta, so is, my girlfriend works there, I should get it straight now. Whether it's Meta, whether it's any of the West Coast tech companies, right? Meta today has 50 recruiters and talent acquisition folks in Minneapolis because they've been able to hire people here versus just the Bay Area. So it's much for us for developers too, but you could find folks who don't want to work for those companies, and you can be really more aggressive about it. And I think that's what Granicus will be doing going forward too, is saying, like, you need to have a compelling message. Here's why us, because now there's lots of noise for us in the room, right? How many in-mail are you getting in a week? And so for Granicus, for us, is how do we make those marketing messages better? But I think for this company, it's 1,100 now. It was 950 when I started in September. So when you think about that, I have another follow-up question, by the way. Somewhere before you finish, though, what would you do over again? Respectfully, what did we jack up, and now we've had to change and do it this way? So if there's some learning lessons, if that's not a slide.
It isn't, but I bet we have lots of things. Thank you. Yes, just to quickly finish up the metrics question. Granicus also, it does all kinds of quarterly surveys, basically asking everybody hey, what's your experience working here? What do you like? What don't you like? And so I know that's been going on, I think, at least since before the pandemic. And so there is data there around, what are people's concerns about working at this place? What do they like? I don't know if you all have seen anything about specifically as it relates to the pandemic or not. So the effect of going remote on that, I'm not sure, but that data is there. So I think, so now we can go to one of two things. Either what's it like when you're on camera all the time, or boy, what do we wish we did differently? Hey, let's vote on it. Who wants to talk about how exhausting it is to be on camera all the time? You can clap or raise your hand. Who wants to talk about what we wish we did different? Yeah, okay. Nawid, Kristi, do you have any initial thoughts?
I guess from a company to us standpoint, one of the things that Granicus started doing recently, which is really great, is doing some partial reimbursement, at least for our internet or some other qualifying utilities, which I think has been really helpful. And I guess that is one thing that would have been great from the start, but none of us knew how long we'd be in this situation. That's all I got off the top of my head.
I know there are things, but I'm blanking on the ones that I probably would have thought about yesterday.
So I think, as I said before, Granicus was already remote friendly. I think especially in the software development space, it kind of varied a bit by which department you were working in, which team, but in general, we already had some people who were working in the home offices, like somebody who works in New Jersey, and we have no actual office in New Jersey or New York. I will say I think some of the actual online tools we really started to see how, boy, they could have been a lot better once we were all remote, because suddenly they became very important. One is our wiki software, Confluence. Who here works at a place that has Confluence? Of you folks, can you actually find anything you're looking for in Confluence? Yeah, one person. You are the Lord of Confluence. Yeah, and I think and also that going remote combined with the company growing with a lot of new technologies and products coming in, that's made Confluence almost unusable, which is unfortunate because that's actually where a lot of good information is for us. I have yet to find anything that's as good as a whiteboard for just being like, hey, I want to just draw some boxes and talk about how this thing the database is here and the web server will do the thing. Does anybody have good diagramming software?
I usually will go for, if I'm talking flows, and how does this communicate with this Visio?
Okay.
Because you can just drag, and it's very simple shapes, and the Lucid chart also kind of does the same thing. There's pros and cons, but it's the same thing. For explaining, this is how the universe works. That sort of thing is, but once you get into the details, that's where it falls apart because you're constrained by kind of physical location of where you put boxes and, if I need to drag this, all of a sudden, boom, everything goes away. Teams just have whiteboards, yay.
Ooh.
And I'm a little iffy. I started using it and then realized I couldn't capture the text easily from the whiteboard into notes in a document. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I love being able to write on a big whiteboard and then take a picture afterwards, so you have notes and everything else. I have a weird question comment. I was half remote when we ended up going remote. I was working in Minneapolis, Colorado team, and because I was the only team member, I was placed in another department. And it was great because I overheard things that affected our department, but weren't official. And how do you get that kind of, hey, someone's talking about something I care about in other departments? Because in my case it was, we work in healthcare information. I was in with brokers, and brokers complain. Something's going wrong, brokers complain. And so I would hear, brokers are talking about this. I would be able to go, look into it. So by the time the official request of, hey, can you look into this? I was like, yeah, we found it, we fixed it. Tell the brokers it's all okay. That's an efficiency that's gone away with fully remote work. Is there any replacement for inter-team conversation in an informal way?
Do you got an answer to that?
I can talk about what we've done to solve that problem. And solve is too strong of a word.
Yeah.
I can talk about what we've done to make that stuff a little bit less. So I manage the cloud operations and DevOps engineering teams for the Department of Health. And we have a large number of different teams. And so the problem that we had pretty early on is getting social conversations occurring between these different teams, where in person you might bump into someone. On remote, it's really hard to bump in. So one of the things we did is we made a couple of standing meetings for 2 hours at the end of every Tuesday and Thursday, where people could just drop in. We called it open mic. And it did two things. One, it slapped two 2-hour meetings at the end of the day on anyone's schedule that they wanted to. And at the bare minimum, they could just accept that meeting and not have someone schedule them for a meeting for the last 2 hours of the day. So that was kind of nice. And then it was just open for people to drop in. And some folks dropped in just to hear other people chat, right? They didn't want to actually talk. It wasn't you weren't required to talk about X, Y, or Z. They just wanted to hear people chatting. And so we wound up, like that became a spot where we did a lot of brainstorming, and a lot of ad hoc, like tiger teams were created out of just conversations within that open mic venue.
Cool.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So with the leadership that you face within your company, did anybody have the perception that that was a waste of time? And if so, how did you challenge that?
We didn't. Our biggest concern was burnout.
Yeah.
Because we went through the grinder for real during the past couple of years. And so the number one concern of our, me and the rest of the leadership team was, how do we not fry out people? Like it was 22 months of like 60, 70, 80 hour work weeks. So anything that we could do to like have people have some downtime, everyone's like, yes, do that thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Were they doing these open hours during the 60, 70 hour?
Yes,
Okay.
it was absolutely critical. Like this is during company time or organization time. It was 2:30 to 4:30 every Tuesday, Thursday afternoon. Right smack in the middle at the end of the day. I mean, most of us were working like just crazy, but it was during normal work time, and that was really important so that we like, no, this is one, it's a value of ours, right? This is important for us. We're not asking people to do this outside of the mythical work day. It's during work.
But if they're working 80 hours a week and they're taking 2 hours during the work day, that means they're working
Well,
the night too, right?
yeah, but it is, so there was our core like teams that were like focusing on like all of the pandemic stuff. So ops, web dev, app dev, data systems. And for us it was like just this super like nonstop. But we had other app dev teams tied in different divisions, and we'd use them to kind of surge into dealing with these different things. So they were maybe working 50 hours or whatever. But we, outside of these venues, we did not have mechanisms to communicate with the teams that were not, like the skeleton crews that were not dealing with pandemic response. And so we're like, we can't lose contact with these people because, one, we're like coming with all kinds of new tech and new ways of doing things. And if they don't have some mechanism, just like hearing, oh, hey, that's a new thing, that's new, then they'd lose out. We'd have more drift between these teams. But also it's just, it helped for the teams who are not tied in the middle of this pandemic thing to talk with us, and they were also experiencing like their teams were cut down to like 20% of normal size, so they were also experiencing difficulties. It was just, even just for morale, just to like talk with people, it was really, really important.
Well, I love the comment that you made that like people just call in to listen.
Yeah.
Like that is such a thing. Like if you look on TikTok, there's people who just stream like study sessions and stuff, so
Yeah.
they don't feel alone.
Yep.
And during this this time of like constant remote working, it's very easy to feel singled out. So to have that like coffee shop buzz in the background, or to catch up on like a buzzword that you might hear, whatever, like that's fantastic. And we've tried to sort of implement some stuff at my companies, but it just hasn't necessarily been as successful. So I love hearing that you're able to make it a thing and keep it going.
It was a really safe space to drop in and then duck out, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like, here's the official meeting we're looking at. It's like totally ad hoc. And,
Yeah.
and there's some days that like there's like 2 people and there are 0 people, right? And other days where there's like 20, 30 people in there, and it was really a low pressure kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep. That's nice. I like that.
We have 85% employee utilization of a Slack plugin called Donut, D-O-N-U-T, and it creates a virtual water cooler and like encourages people to say happy birthday to people on their birthdays. It can pair you up with people you haven't met yet, like specifically keeps track of people you haven't met yet, and then it pairs you up for coffee. D-O-N-U-T for Slack.
Yeah. A question back there.
And free.
Cool. We have a variation on this this open mic night thing. We call it Game Day. And I work with a number of support teams on our specific product lines. And it is technical teams get together to solve specific problems. It could be a war room. It could be the canonical response to a problem that we see in our customer base and install base. So they get together and they talk about how do they reset the server? How do they update the Kubernetes environment? How do they find that string in the data in the MongoDB? and then that spawns other questions. And so you have new people in that conversation now that are saying, oh, I didn't know you could do that, or whoa, that's a new thing to me. Tell me more about that. And that has answered the business question as to what's the ROI on this.
Sure.
Certainly it's internal training, but it opens the floor for new questions as well.
Yeah, I really like that. And like, so I think there's like two threads we're kind of talking about here. One is like space to have this informal, just talking with each other, being people, whether it's about work or not. The other thing is like time during the workday. Something I've thought about like going remote work fully is like there are so many built-in breaks when you work in the office. Because you show up at 9, and then it's like, well, I'm going to spend like 15 minutes making coffee and talking with people. Well, stand-up's at 9:30, so I'm not really going to get into anything anyway. Then we'll do stand-up, and then, work for a couple hours. Then we're all going to go to lunch. Those kinds of like things, depending on what your home life is like, just aren't there. Either that or they're there all the time. Like if you got like a toddler. So I don't know. I'm just thinking more about like also like how do you kind of maintain breaks, or how do you do things that like break up the workday so you don't go crazy and spend like 8 hours at your desk and become a zombie. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I either am completely distracted or hyper-focused, so I have to be like very intentional about setting timers for breaks or working. I recently heard about workstation popcorn, which is the idea of working in one spot and then taking a little break, moving to another spot, which is like just enough difference to sort of get your brain going again and be interested in what you're doing. And the other idea is exercise snacks, so sort of fitting in a couple jumping jacks or whatever every so often during the day, just to like get yourself up and out of your chair for a few minutes and kind of get the blood flowing and take a little breather.
Nice.
So some of us are lucky enough to have folks who live with, partners, roommates. And if they're also remote, that is a great way to just kind of break from your desk and go have a conversation. Another thing is if you have good access to the outdoors, a quick walk onto the deck or downstairs out to like some sort of courtyard or whatever it is you have available. Those are the two things that I tend to use. Also, just kind of stepping away from the desk and maybe going to play a quick game of something just kind of break up the, I'm at this one spot doing this thing, let me go do something else I enjoy. For some people, it's they're going to take a run. I personally get a lot out of just playing a quick game of Magic on the computer. And it's using those to punctuate the day, having conversations, going outside. I'm really only losing like 45 minutes or something, but I'm getting so much out of that it juices the rest of the time, and I get so much. I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm not like, oh man, thank God that's over. I'm like, it's just the day. And I just transition from being at my desk, working, even if it was like a stressful day, or if it was like a really laid back day, to transition into the rest of my life. And it's just kind of cleaner when you just are able to punctuate a little bit of life throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. See, question?
I was going to say something that my company did whenever we first started going remote. Is they sent out emails to everyone giving suggestions like, hey, do this, because we had some remote workers at the start, but we sent almost everyone home at the start of everything, and so they sent out emails saying, hey, try this, and something that was pushed really hard was, if you used to drive into work, don't then just start working at the time you drive in. Still start at the time you would have gotten to the office. And then, but try to still make that transition. So, if you start at 9 o'clock, at 8:45, go and walk around the house, or you're traveling to work and you're still getting in that mindset and not being afraid to, like y'all said, take breaks. Because like if you're in the office, you're gonna get up and walk away. I know we had some people say like they were anxious about the fact of like they're afraid if they don't answer something on their computer immediately, they're gonna be seen as lazy and not working because they're at home. Well, you wouldn't be that in the office either. You could be away from your computer for 10 or 15 minutes and just keeping in mind that it's not different. It's still the workday. You're still going to be away. You're going to go to the bathroom. You're going to eat lunch. Don't be anxious about normal things.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. During the height of the pandemic, obviously this wasn't an option, but has anyone experimented with using co-working spaces when they work remotely? Because do you guys know about that?
Yeah. Do you have, what's your experience?
I pay for like 1 day a week just to get somewhere else. That change of venue. So it's totally worth it. Like fewer collected. And you're still alone. It's weird, but it's just a different space.
Yeah, I actually worked primarily remote years ago, and I did the same thing, actually. It was Coco at the time, but just 1 day a week, it just helped to like have that random floating day where I just went into a space. Field Collective also has some really nice spaces, so just being in a beautiful space was also really nice and helpful. But yeah, absolutely. And I know, over the last few years, like restaurants, coffee shops have kind of gone through a lot of turnover. But I know, like, even if you don't want to do like a full co-working space, like there are some places that are nice to just go hang out in. You got Wi-Fi. You probably don't want to have calls there, but maybe you don't want to have calls anyway. What time is it? How much more time do we have here? -4 minutes. All right. So y'all been great.